All right. Okay, depending on the size of the project that you have, sometimes they ask you to do an overlay. And Sharon will show you, I did an overlay in plastic of the pattern. So this way you can put it on the wool and you know where to put your pieces. If it's a small piece like this, you probably don't need the overlay. You can just place it where you want to place it. But if it's a little more complicated with a couple pieces, an overlay is helpful.
What's the overlay made of?
Well, you can use tracing paper. If you have a light box and you do the tracing paper, as long as you can kind of see through it. I choose to do it in I'll buy like some plastic from Joann Fabrics by the yard and keep some on hand. Yeah, the vinyl plastic, and then I'll just trace it with a permanent marker. And then I can lay it over my wool piece, and it's easier for me to put my other small cutout pieces underneath it to make sure they're in the right position. So it makes it, and then what you do is you can pin or fuse. Since I am portable, I tend to fuse. That's why I fuse my pieces, because when I take it, it's just easier and the pins don't fall out. And when you're working on it, if there's a lot of pins in your pieces, you're going to get stuck with the pins. So that's an individual preference, you know. And the stitches that you're going to use, basically, you're going to use some very basic stitches just to secure your pieces to your wool. And it's usually a blanket stitch, or a back stitch, or a whip stitch. That's all you need to secure the pieces to the wool. You can do fancy stitches, whatever you want to do. That is, it was crazy quilting is a long time ago with all the embroidery stitches. It's been there for a long time. Sue Spargo has kind of rekindled a lot of that interest, and she chooses to use her platform in wool. So, I mean, you can just take it off the beaten path. You can see I have a piece there that I've started to do some of that on. But that, again, is an individual choice. So, and then when you want to add pattern details, like for instance, if you're going to do a floral scene, you may have vines and tendrils. And what you can do is you can either mark them with a pencil that's erasable, a marker, and then embroider those on, or you can put a piece of tissue paper and stitch over them and pull the tissue paper away, because you're going to embroider over those stitches anyway. So that will give you your design.
Do you ever use like the sulky that you can trace on and it sticks, and then
You can use that too.
I've used
Yeah,
it. It
and
works.
pull it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it works pretty
Yep.
well. I also use cling wrap. It's a lot cheaper.
cling wrap or press and seal?
Press and seal or cling wrap.
Probably
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Either, anything that you can
Yeah.
put your design down. Yep. The finishing, typically you don't need batting when you finish these, you just put the back on it. I tend to, depending on my piece, I'll sometimes put a binding on it. But you can also, I've been known to do like you do a quilt, stitch around it, turn it inside out, and that's okay. Or you can stitch it down on the edges. It's an individual choice, how you want to finish it.
Judy?
How do you start and end your threads?
I'm sorry?
How do you start and end your threads? Do you knot or do you
I
stitch
do.
over?
No, I not, because the knot's in the back. Yeah. And then a lot of what I use, like for my embellishments, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of threads out there. I have a shop near me back home that is a thread shop. So, I mean, she carries all kinds of thread, like chenille thread, a wool thread. She also carries silk ribbon. So I tend to, if I'm going to use it on a vine or a tendril, sometimes I'll use a different type of thread. So it's whatever you want to do, or you can just use plain DMC if you want. You know, it's whatever you want to make of it.
Can you help us send it back with the embellished one so everybody can see them?
While Judy's doing that, I just want to point out, Judy and I kind of come from different places. And when we were talking about finishing, I said, oh, well, I fuse mine all the time. And she had never thought about fusing it. So it's for the small pieces, this is fused. I didn't sew it, and then I finished it. Isn't that beautiful?
And some of the small pieces that you see on here, like these little circles, you don't have to stitch all the edges down. You just can use you can use a bead, or you can use a small embroidery stitch in the center, a French knot to hold it down. It doesn't have to be held down, the small circles. So it does. And I tend to, and you can see from one of my pieces I have the pumpkin on the table over there is a piece that I did, and you can do three-dimensional too with wool. That's there. And then the blue vase that's there, I use different things also on it.
Isn't cheating to use your machine instead of doing?
That's the other piece. There's a piece I have, if you want to hold it up, that I did in the machine. I have arthritis in my thumb, which is causing a problem for me since I love to do handwork. So this piece was done on my machine. And I find that up north there's a lot of people that are starting to migrate to doing it on their machine. I used a heavier thread on that, but I took advantage of the various stitches on my machine to do it. So, and then this other piece, when you come up if you want to look, this other big piece that's partially finished, it looks like a winter scene with houses. I'm doing that on the machine because they're big pieces. So I'm going to plan to do this one on the machine too. What she's showing you is the top part of it that's partially finished. And that's all, I did that all in the machine. And then the bottom part.
And that shows the stabilized back.
And then the bottom part, since they are large pieces, and then they get attached. The two of them will be stitched together. No?
Who did this one?
Pardon?
Who did this one?
I did. I bought that pattern. That was supposed to be a cotton applique pattern. And I bought that at a quilt show. She's falling down.
Yeah.
She needs to be stuck back on.
Because she did partially wool, partially cotton.
That piece was done, I wanted to do a Florida winter, so I did it in pastels. And I did it on cotton backing.
Judy, when you do one that's on cotton backing, do you put batting in it or not?
What I did was the individual blocks are treated individually, then they're stitched together like a quilt, and that I did. I put a batting on it and I had it quilted. Yeah. The other one that I had done, you're going to see the hexes on the table. That was a pattern. I tend to look at a pattern and I say, I really like this pattern. Yeah, that was supposed to be a wall hanging. And I loved the things. And I said, I'm going to do it in wool. But when I went to put it together in a big wall hanging, it didn't look right. So I said, well, I'm just going to make it into a individual table runner. And I put it together on the table.
I literally thought it was one piece, and then I picked it up and was like, well, they're separate. But
And
you laid them down?
I did have it stitched together at one time, and it was on my dining room table.
But when you lay them down, you can't tell
Those are the pieces, that is, and the resources. Now, that is a pattern that I fell in love with. It's a tree skirt. And out of the and I'll explain the resources. I sent for the pattern, so each of them, 2 of them are done, and 1 is in process. So you can see the process. That's the process.
Here's part of the process.
Oh, she broke it.
No, she can't break it. And the other 2 that she have are completed pieces, and I have to do about a dozen of them.
And is this part of your
That
process?
is the instructions for the one that's not finished yet. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Tree skirt.
And that's gonna be a tree skirt.
And you can do something small. I mean, you're gonna see I have a needle case there too that I did.
You showed us with the houses.
Yeah.
Here's the needle case. She has.
That's cotton. It is cotton. Yeah. Now, if I wanted to buy a wool piece, it's a little pricier, and it's going to be a little heavier. And sometimes it depends. I just wanted the sky look, and I couldn't quite find it in wool, so that's why I used the cotton bag. And the same thing with the bottom piece. It looks more like snow, so that's why I picked cotton as my background instead of pure wool. And then I'll probably do a lot of embellishing on it, probably put a Christmas tree somewhere along that way, and probably do some stitching along the sky and the snow just to bring it out. And that's the needle case also. So you can take it as small or as big as you want. And that's a pin that I made in the class.
That's
So-
amazing art. It's truly an amazing art.
Thank you. But I mean, I love wool. So once you start to work with wool, it just feels well.
So you're doing an amazing job, both of you.
Thank you. Now, some of the resources that we have, we wanted to let you know. AQS is a wonderful resource if you're going to look for wool patterns or even kits. The other resource I have is please take one of these. This is the shop that I told you about, and she gave me these cards. This is what got me going on the quilt. And this is where you can get anything you need is to make a piece, even the patterns. They put together kits or whatever. But they're a great shop. And the other resources we have is online. I belong to Primitive Gatherings, Granny's Legacy, and Buttermilk Basin. And I get most of my patterns from there. They also furnish you with kits if you're interested. And I think Granny's Legacy has been doing, classes online. They're starting to do that nowadays. And as far as books, these are one of the best books you can get if you're interested in getting started. It goes into a little more detail, but they're a great resource. And as I said, the threads you can get at the AQS show. So, enjoy.
Note, we do, if there's enough interest in a class, we will look to make that happen sometime in March, after the craziness of the quilt show is over. But we want to let people know that it will not be a class in teaching all the stitches. It will be a basic class on the process. You can bring your own pattern, you can bring your own supplies. If you need to shop in my closet, I live locally, I live over in Margaritaville, and I'm willing to share. I have a big tub of stuff. And we have a sheet up here that is a list of all the resources. Now, we only printed out 20 of them for people who are interested or people who do not have a printer at home. So if you don't need that, we will put the resource and a supply list on the website. So if you don't need that, please don't take it because they are limited. So anyway, we hope to see you in March for a class. We also, on the survey, asked if there was an interest in forming a small group. And the reason that Judy and I are so well paired is because she is a snowbird and I am not. So during the months that Judy's here, you will have the two of us available at any kind of group that we start. In the summer months, when Judy goes back to Massachusetts, where it doesn't snow in the summertime, so, you know, we will be there, I will be there during the summer months, and it will be a good opportunity to learn from each other. So we've got it covered year-round if you want to do it. I want to thank Judy for allowing me to partner with her. It was really fun. Judy and I met like 3 times. And to put the program together and say, well, how do we want to do this? And it was interesting. We'd sit there and we'd say, well, I don't do it that way. Well, how do you do it? You know? And so it was interesting to have the two perspectives because we do it a little bit differently. In some areas, we do it exactly the same in others. But anyway, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Judy for allowing me to learn from her for 3 hours at Panera's. So any questions before we go?
Lisa, did you
I
have
have
a
a
question?
question. I have a project, it's my first one that I've ever started, and it's on kind of like a homespun. And I've already attached all the wool and done a lot of embellishing. Is it too late to put that stabilizer on the back?
You could, but if you're working and it's going okay.
I am getting a little fraying around the edge, so I'm a little worried. I mean, I can still cut it and get my block out of it, but I didn't know if I should do that.
My rule of thumb is if I would treat it like you treat embroidery. Whenever I've done an embroidered project, I always back it because it gives it that stability and, you know, it's not going to go anywhere.
You have to use steam on that product.
Okay.
That was one thing.
It has to be wet.
We were talking about fusing, and Judy and I were talking about sometimes you have difficulty because wool is heavy. Sometimes it's hard to get it to stick.
You have to use steam.
So you have to use steam. That's why they call it steam-a-seam. But I also found that if you take a wet face cloth
Yes.
and put it on top of your project and use a hot iron on that helps. We also talked about the wool mats.
I use a flowers sack. I get it wet, put it on top of it, and then let it sit and dry. Instead of using normal steam.
Yeah. So that's part of the thing that we would learn in our hive or even in the class is, you know, some of the little tricks that we do.
And if you have those wool mats, they're selling the wool mats
Yeah.
to use. They're wonderful to work on with wool because it doesn't crush your wool and it just seems to help it absorb that steam a lot easier.
Are you hearing in the back?
You want to add anything else?
Thank you.
Go look around, they're just amazing, just absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're very welcome.
So moving along.